Hi everyone and welcome back to One Autistic Person. This is the 24th video in a 50 video series that I'm doing going through the questions and statements of the Autism Quotient, which is a pre-screening tool that is often used as part of the assessment process for autism. As I was going through that assessment myself, I found it quite jarring that we had to look at everything that in relation to our traits and the way that we experience the world as a deficit. It's necessary for us to do so for the diagnosis to be given, and I understand the reasons for that. But what I wanted to do was look at the statements individually and see whether we can flip that narrative from it being a deficit to it either being a benefit or positive. If it's not a benefit, if we can't find a benefit or a positive to it, then what adjustments and mediations are we putting in place? Mitigations are we putting in place? Not mediations. Mitigations are we putting in place for these? And my idea of these videos is that everybody should share their experiences with each other, and I'd love that if people could share their experiences in the comments so that other people can sort of gain from your life experience and how you experience autism. First of all, I'm going to do my obligatory apologies that I seem to be doing in my videos at the moment. So first of all, glasses. If you've not seen my previous videos, I'm still learning how to sort out the lighting in my videos so that the glasses don't get glare. I unfortunately have to wear these at the moment because of the fact that I'm getting quite bad headaches. And on the back of that, you might notice that I'm in a dressing gown today. It's Sunday. I'm absolutely tired after a whole week of feeling quite poorly and sort of pushing through. But I really wanted to get this video out. I love doing these videos, so I didn't want to wait, but I also didn't want to get out of my dressing gown. So you'll have to put up with the fact that I'm in my dressing gown, I'm afraid. So this video I'm going to do similarly to the previous video that I did, which was in relation to pattern seeking and how autistic brains look for patterns in things. And I looked at that from a good, a bad and an ugly perspective, and this one I'm going to do a similar thing where I'm going to break it into three parts, which is the pros and cons of going to the theatre, the pros and cons of going to the museum, and then my conclusion of actually what I think, because this one was a difficult one for me when I did the AQ. And the reason why is because this one and the one that talks about the difference between a library and a party, would you rather go to a library or a party, I found them quite jarring, because I think the assumption is that people would assume that an autistic person would want to go to a museum, or that an autistic person would want to go to the library. But I just wanted to go through the pros and cons from my perspective, and as with any of these videos, it's always my perspective, my life experience, how I'm experiencing things. And what I want to do is open this up for people to have that discussion and to sort of say how they are feeling and how they experience autism with each other, because I think that's a great thing for us to do. So for me, I put definitely agree to this, which was I would rather go to a theatre than a museum, and there were various reasons that I sort of went through. I thought quite heavily about this. If you've seen my video where I did the Autism Quotient as a video, this one and the library and party one, I did spend quite a lot of time sort of contemplating, and I think I've come to the right conclusion. But what I wanted to do in this video was to go through the pros and cons of each, and then sort of look at which one actually would I prefer to do, and that's what my plan is. So what we'll do first is we'll go through the theatre and look at the pros and cons. So here are the pros and cons of going to the theatre for me personally. So let's first of all look at for me, the pros of going to the theatre/cinema. So I'm going to look at this as the theatre or the cinema, because I go to the cinema relatively more than I do the theatre. So the theatre for me, I've probably been once in the last decade to go and watch a show that was done by an amateur dramatics group that was Mort, which is a Discworld story. And that kind of brings me to the first pro, to be honest with you, is that for me, if I'm going to a theatre or a cinema, there's a reason for me to go. It's exciting, it's something that I want to watch, it's often linked to a long-term special interest, or it's linked to something that I really enjoy doing, or enjoy watching, or enjoy being involved in. So, for instance, I was meant to go to the cinema recently to go and watch Beetlejuice. I absolutely love Beetlejuice. Unfortunately, my social anxiety got the better of me that day, and I just wasn't able to go. But that's the kind of thing that I'll be going to. Wicked comes out later on in November, and Wicked is a huge, intense interest for me. The Wizard of Oz generally, the whole world and universe of Wizard of Oz is. So I know I'll get there while Wicked is on, because my brain will allow me to be able to just go and do it. So it's often linked to a strong interest. So if it's going to be a genre that I'm interested in, a series of films that I'm interested in, or something's coming out that I've been really excited about. So that excitement really drives me and allows probably my ADHD thought process to maybe take over and allow me to be a bit more spontaneous about it. Although I do need to plan it, and I'm waiting for Wicked to become an option to book at Cineworld for me to be able to go in. The other thing that's a pro for me with this is that at a cinema or a theatre, you all face, once you're in there, once you're actually in the theatre, once you're in that room, everybody's expected to act in a certain way, and most of the time people do. And you're all facing the front, everybody's doing the same thing, so social expectations are really clearly laid out, so that's actually really easy from a social perspective once I'm in the theatre. I'll get to outside of the theatre on social interactions in a second. Cinemas and theatres both are able to make adjustments if you talk to them. So for me, I have got what is called a CEA card, which allows me to take a companion with me because of the fact that I really struggle communicating with people if there's something that goes wrong. If there was an emergency, I could become quite overwhelmed. I can become overwhelmed in cinemas, and I have done and had to leave before. So that's very rare that happens, but it has happened. So you can get that, and then there's the access card, which allows you again companions and adjustments to be made in relation to your autism and how you feel around your autism, how you experience autism. If somebody sees you have that card, or you can show them that card, then they can understand the fact they will maybe need to ask you what they can do to make adjustments and support for you. So that's a good thing from that as well. And those adjustments are quite big within cinemas. Some cinemas even have noise cancelling headphones that you can wear, so you can actually hear the sound of the film, but not having to hear any of the other noises going on around you. And the thing is, with going to the cinema as well, it's something that if I want to experience watching a film in a big screen, it's the only way of me really being able to truly experience it until it comes out at home. But my TV isn't huge, and I don't have a big system that I use to watch the TV. So if I want to experience that immersiveness, I've got to do it that way. So that's it's kind of a pro, but kind of a driver, I suppose, into making me more likely to go and do this and be okay with it. So then if we go into cons, so cons for me is the social interaction outside of the room that it's happening in, whether that's the theatre or the cinema. It's the fact that I'm going to have to make social interactions. If I need to buy a ticket, if I've not booked it online, I'll have to speak to somebody. That can become really overwhelming for me. Buying things that we're going to eat, which I'll get to in a second. The fact that there are multiple interactions quite often, the fact that you have to speak to somebody to book the ticket and then you have to show somebody else the ticket. There's lots of things that could potentially go wrong in my head in that scenario. So there's lots of potential interactions, as well as loads of other people that, especially if it's a busy day, like it was when the last time I went to the cinema, which was to watch the final 2 episodes of Doctor Who, and there were lots of people there. I was kind of okay with that a little bit more because everybody seemed to be very similar to me, and that people were very excited about it and were very into what they were doing. I would seem like a lot of people weren't being overly boisterous or overly interacting with people outside of their group and making it feel awkward. So that there is all of that. There's lots of potential social interactions that could happen outside, but not inside. But once you're inside, there's that safety net. Once you're inside the actual theatre, people are expected to act in a certain way, and generally do. At that same show that I went to go and watch, there were a few people that got quite boisterous and quite excited about it, which was in some ways nice to see, but it was very interruptive to me and getting back into watching the episode. So it very rarely happens, and that is actually the only time I think it's ever happened where it's been that boisterous, where I've been like, it's too much for me, and I was a little bit overwhelmed by the fact that people were interrupting, and it meant me getting back into watching it was quite difficult. But that's very, very rare that happens. Needing to use the toilet. So I have proprioception issues, so I tend to not know when I need to use the toilet. until it's too late. Not too late. Until it's at a dire specific need to go to the toilet. Very, very much a strong need to go to the toilet. So I have to make sure that I sit on an aisle row, because I want to make sure by the aisle, not an aisle row. By the aisle, so that I can get out quickly and not be able to not have to walk past too many people or push past people, because I find that really, really difficult. I've accidentally booked the wrong side of the cinema before and ended up being right at the other end, and it's been an absolute nightmare for me. So yeah, the toilet situation is for me harrowing. If I get overwhelmed, then I have had to leave the cinema, as I've said. So there is a possibility that I might get overwhelmed by the sound, that the noises and everything might become too much. And I have to sort of phase out. If I can't phase out, then I will have to leave the room. And that comes with, sound is the main one. If something's just way too loud, and it's just it really is painful for me. And then for me, I have issues with eating in public, but I feel the need to eat at the cinema. So for me, it wouldn't be the experience of going to the cinema without eating, but I feel very awkward about the fact that I am eating, because I feel like I'm making too much noise. But I also don't particularly like eating in public and in front of other people that I don't know. So they're the cons when it comes to the theatre/cinema. So that's the pros and cons of those. And now we will go into having a look at the pros and cons of going to a museum. So with museums, it's a bit of a strange one. So there's basically one pro, which is a big pro, but it's only really one pro, and that is that I do have a quite intense interest in history, in science, in design, in the things that are inside museums. I have an absolutely intense interest over. So that can drive me to go to museums, and has driven me to go to museums in the past. So a huge pro, which kind of stacks up to be near enough as much as there is there when it comes to pros of going to a theatre. But on the flip side, there are a lot of cons, and I think this is where people misinterpret how. I think people will think that interest will overtake hugely the ability to go in and deal with the overwhelming experience that I personally find, as with these videos, is always as I personally find, of the environment of a museum. So as much as that interest can drive me to go and do that, there is another thing with this, is that I can pretty much experience everything to do with a museum by watching a YouTube video, by researching it online, by looking at other videos. There's other ways that I can experience looking and researching these things without having to physically be in a museum. Yes, it's great and it's lovely, and I feel that nostalgic sort of, well, not nostalgic, that sort of cultural. In-depth humanity feeling that you have of this thing has existed for all this time, when you're looking at something historic. That yes, that is fascinating, and it does, and I love that feeling. Does it outweigh what I'm just about to go through with the cons? So obviously the first one for me, the first con for me would be the social aspect. People, there are people everywhere in a museum. You have to move out of the way for people. There are people's expectations of you, that you're expected to act in a certain way, but the other people expect you to act in a certain way, and you expect other people to act in a certain way. I find that I get pushed out of the way quite often, people standing in front of me quite often, and this is going to sound awful, but obviously children want to look at things, and it's like, if I'm really intensely interested in something, that really is jarring to me, and I will allow that child to go and have a look, because obviously they're a child. I want them to experience it more than I do, but it is very jarring, and it makes my experience extremely negative. There's the social expectations of sort of like people talking to you, or people wanting to tell you about things, and I've had that where people have been in a museum and somebody really wants to tell you about this thing, and it could potentially be somebody else who has a special interest in it, but I just don't want to, I just want to experience it and not have that conversation. I find the same as with libraries, I find museums extremely loud, and I know that sounds really strange, but everything makes a lot of noise. They're big buildings with lots of noise, people walking, people talking elsewhere, and you can hear lots of things going on. The lighting is really unbearable for me, and it can change quite quickly. You can go from a very lit area to a very dark area, and I can become very, very dysregulated very quickly. I find museums often have, obviously they're going to do this next thing that I'm going to say, they're going to smell. They've got old things in them, especially ones that are history based. But sometimes those smells can be overbearing to me or overpowering and can make me feel sick. Also, my attention span, and I don't know whether this is just, I don't know whether if you only have autism, if you're only autistic and you don't have ADHD, whether this would be the same for you. But for me, my attention span is a problem, and I get so distracted by wanting to go and see that other thing that I don't ever spend the time on looking at it. Whereas if I'm researching it at home or watching a YouTube video, I will actually be really involved in watching it, and I think I get quite a lot of the same experience. It's just that extra bit where you can sort of like feel like you're in the presence of something that I would miss out on. So like I say, being expected to move out of the way for other people is a problem if I've become engrossed in that thing, and then it just makes the whole experience, when that happens 3 or 4 times for me, it just becomes a bit of an issue. And also, when I do get excited, sometimes I can stim. I can get sort of like quite loud and quite. So being exactly what it is that annoys me about other people, I can become that person if I get excited by something and want to show the person that I'm with, and I'm like, oh, come here, look at this, and get really overexcited about it and really animated and start stimming and flapping and things. So, and then I become embarrassed because of the fact that I've got in other people's view, overexcited, and that can then be seen and as a negative, and people have negative interactions with me, and then the whole experience becomes quite difficult for me. So, as you can see from this, it's quite a complicated one, because I really love all of the aspects, probably more so the things that you would go and see in a museum on a day-to-day basis. I'd love to see that all the time, and I do research those things all the time. Being in that environment for me is not positive, and I feel there are other ways of me doing it, and other ways of me looking into those things and researching those things and watching, like I say, YouTube videos about them, which are as close to actually being around them. It's just that the feeling of being close to the actual item is not there. So but with the theatre, it's the social aspects makes it much more easy to deal with. But actually, it's a restricted time period that I can go and experience it there, and without breaking the law, I'm not going to be able to watch that show, that movie that's on. I'm not going to be able to watch that without waiting for it to come out or breaking the law, which I'm not going to do. So for me, the conclusion is the theatre is, I would much rather go to the theatre than to the museum if we're talking cinema theatre. And the same would stand with theatre. You know, if I was to really want to watch something at the theatre, I'd probably be more driven to do that than to go to a museum. There are other options there for me in the museum. So in conclusion, that is what I'm going to say, is that theatre is the answer to this. I still definitely agree with it. As I mentioned, there are a few different things that I mentioned around adjustments, and like I say, there's the CEA card, which is specifically the cinema related one. So that allows you to be accompanied, and it allows you to be able to sort of quite quickly show somebody that you may need adjustments, and to discuss adjustments from a cinema by cinema basis as well. And also the website, the CEA website, allows you to be able to see those. And then there's the access card, which allows you to do many different things. That's done by a company called Nimbus. I'll see whether I can link them in my description. I'm not sure whether I can do that yet, because you have to be a YouTube member for 2 months to be able to be posting videos systematically for more than 2 months for them to allow you to do it. I don't know whether I'm there at that point yet, so if I can, I will link them in there. But it's Nimbus Access Card is the other one, and that actually covers a load of different things. It has theatres, it has theme parks, it has National Trust, there's so many different things that it allows you, if there's an agreement from the access people. It's very much like going through a sort of benefits assessment. It is quite strenuous to go through, but it allows you to have a companion. It allows you to be able to sort of have, like in theme parks, it allows you to have the rider access pass, which allows you to be able to not queue up but it doesn't stop you having to wait the time, but it stops you having to be in the queue, if that makes sense. So you have to wait the amount of time between each queue to go on the next ride, but you don't have to actually physically be in the queue. but there's lots of adjustments that can be made on the back of having that card. So I would have a look into that if you do feel that you do need some support in these areas, things like cinemas, theme parks, theatres, anything like that. Those two are the two that I have. There are many others that you can do, but they're the two that I use personally, and I found them really helpful. So yeah, for me, conclusion here is theatre, which would be shocking, I think, to even myself. If I was to ask myself that question without thinking about it, I would have probably said museum, because of that deep interest that I have in history and science and design and the things that you find in museums. But actually, I'm probably more likely to enjoy going to the cinema than I would come away from going to the cinema feeling drained from the social interactions that I possibly had to have, but wouldn't be anywhere near as much as if I've been to a museum. And actually, from a museum, I may come away feeling actually really dysregulated, and not actually realising that I'd become dysregulated as that had gone on, because lots of little interactions would have happened, whereas the theatre, it's one interaction very quickly. Well, not very quickly, it's a few hours, but it's the same thing happening. So I just think my brain can deal with it a lot better. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to this video. Like I say, I have been quite poorly, so I apologise that this video, in some ways when I've been doing it, it's felt a bit rushed. But I'm trying to get it out of my brain, and I don't want to not do a video, because that will then dysregulate me. So I apologise if this isn't the greatest, because I was really hoping it would be quite a good video. Yeah. If you would like to subscribe, great. As I've said with all of these videos, please comment and give your experiences. I really want to hear your experiences, and I'm sure other people would as well. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.